Hello, ladies. Time to trade off from doing all the other things you do to watching me and learning how to manage your menopause your way. And as with any trade-off, there are some advantages to watching this video and some disadvantages to watching this video. One of the advantages is that you'll learn something that will make the rest of your life a lot better. One of the disadvantages is that you'll have to forfeit doing something else for a few minutes. Another advantage is that you'll be empowered to make good decisions for yourself in managing your menopause your way. A disadvantage is that you'll have to stop multitasking and pay attention to only this video. And your job is to decide whether the advantages or the disadvantages weigh more. Do you see what I just did? I weighed two options and analyzed the trade-offs according to my priorities. And that's what we're talking about today. Trade-offs and priorities. So, do you realize that life is all about trade-offs and priorities? Think about it. If you're married, you have the security of a long-term relationship and companionship. But the trade-off is that you have to constantly put up with that one person's issues. Or, if you're single, you have freedom to do as you please. But the trade-off is that you don't have a partner with whom to share your experiences. Which of the two is the priority for you? If you vacation in the same place all the time, you have the comfort and familiarity, predictability of knowing everything about the place you go. But the trade-off is that you don't get to experience new places. Which of the two is the priority for you? If you wake up and go to the gym early every morning, you feel great and you look great. But the trade-off is that you don't get to stay up late and sleep in. Which of the two is the priority for you? Have you ever seen a television show called House Hunters? It presents people who are moving to a new place and they need to find a place to live. And on the show, they see 3 different properties from which they have to choose. And inevitably, their decision boils down to trade-offs and priorities. You know, one house is in the city center within walking distance to everything, restaurants and stores, but it's smaller, noisier, and more expensive. And another home is far from the city, but much larger, much quieter. They get much more for their money, but they'll have to drive into work every day, and they'll have to drive to every restaurant and maybe even to the neighbor's house. And the third home is somewhere in between, with some of the features of each of the other two. And the show is all about trade-offs and priorities. In other words, it's about what you're willing to give up in order to get what you value most. And I'm telling you about this because making choices about how to manage your menopause is all about trade-offs and priorities too. Nothing is perfect in every way for you, and nothing is perfect for all women. So let's talk some about these trade-offs and priorities. Let's start with a broad-based trade-off. How about the trade-off between using an alternative and complementary approach versus a traditional medical approach for managing your menopause? If you use alternative and complementary medicine, you can manage your menopause all by yourself without the assistance of a medical doctor. And you can get your products without a prescription. But the products are unpredictable and variable, and there's really no quality control. And there's no big, long list of risks in the package that scare you to death. But that's because there are no studies on those products. And you can treat your symptoms one by one using herbs or a progesterone product made from plants. But you can't prevent any of the long-term diseases associated with menopause, like heart attack, osteoporosis, or Alzheimer's disease. Do you notice that I removed the larger weight that time? Why? Because that may be a bigger deal than some of the other trade-offs. I mean, I hope it is. In other words, I'm hoping that I'm encouraging you to make it a bigger priority than some of the other things. But if you use the traditional medical approach, you have the assistance of a medical professional to oversee and monitor your menopause management. But you have to have a prescription to get your hormones, and they're expensive. But the products are all FDA approved, meaning that there's no variability or unpredictability. But there's that long list in the package that documents all sorts of possible risks. But at least you know that the product's been tested, and you can decide if you're willing to take those risks. And you can take one single product to alleviate all your symptoms of menopause without having to target them all one by one. And you can prevent the long-term diseases associated with menopause by taking the proper dose. Now, the weights you assign for each trade-off will be your own. I'm just demonstrating the idea behind trade-offs. It's all about what's most important to you. It's all about your priorities. So, let's think of another thing. What if we look at the trade-offs between eating a plant-based diet versus an animal-based diet? Let's see. With an animal-based diet, you can eat all the fast food restaurants and really chow down. And you can eat all the high-fat dairy products, even if they make you a little gassy. And it's so easy to eat out with your friends because they love junk food and meat, and no one's thinking about preventing any diseases. And you feel so full after every meal. It's sort of like you ate a brick. But I taught you that the consequences of food on your health have a lot to do with transit time. And you know that it takes days for you to digest animal products. And while animal products slowly slug their way through your digestive tract, they leave behind all sorts of waste products that increase your risk of cancers. But it's so inconvenient to adhere to a strict vegan diet when everyone else is eating meat and dairy. And now let's weigh the trade-offs for a plant-based diet. A 100% plant-based diet is just so healthy and it makes you feel so great. And you'll probably have no trouble controlling your weight ever again. Ugh. But it'll be so much more difficult to eat out at restaurants. Although it would make your skin look radiant and really decrease wrinkling. Yeah, but you'd have to plan ahead for your meals instead of just eating on the go. Yet, you know that a 100% plant-based diet is the best way to prevent a heart attack and almost all cancers. I'm not trying to persuade you or anything. Here's the thing about trade-offs. You'll make some sacrifices no matter what you choose. Every option for your menopause management has some advantages and some disadvantages. Every single one of them. How important each one is to you is your business. It's all about priorities. The goal is to be happy with your decisions, not only now, but when you're 99. And hopefully you'll make choices that enable you to live until you're 99. My goal is to teach you all the pros and cons of each and every option. And that way you won't look back and say, why didn't anyone tell me I would have chosen differently? All of your choices have consequences, so get your priorities in order. And you know, usually the consequences are trade-offs too. You know, the advantages of one will be the disadvantages of the other. That's just the way things are in life. You know, everything in our lives depends on our priorities. You know, this whole topic of priorities reminds me of my days as an OB-GYN resident. I did my residency training at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. And we used 6 different hospitals for our training. And one of those hospitals was for obstetrics only. It was called Jefferson Davis Hospital. And it was this great big 9-story building devoted only to obstetrics. And it was quite literally a baby factory. It was an all indigent hospital with low-income patients from all ethnic groups. And most of the patients had very little or no prenatal care, so we saw everything in its worst form. And we residents ran the place all by ourselves. We had an on-call attending available to us, but we basically ran the place by ourselves day in and day out, and you know, we considered it a weakness to even need to call the attending. And the place was never, ever quiet. Never. And when I say it was a baby factory, I really mean it. We delivered 50 babies every 8 hours, year-round. But despite those large volumes of patients, the place was very organized. At any one time, there were about 7 or 8 residents running the obstetrics services. And it was somewhat of an assembly line, simply because of these large volumes of patients that were coming through at all times. So we resident physicians would essentially stay in one room and take care of every patient who rolled through that room on her way to the next room. So patients who were in labor would move from the laboring room, where the residents did nothing but take care of laboring patients, to the delivery rooms, where those residents did nothing but deliver babies, one after another. And patients who needed a C-section would be rolled to the operating room, where there'd be a resident back there doing nothing but C-sections, hour after hour, one after another. That was my favorite job. I love to be back in the operating room just doing C-section after C-section. It's every surgeon's dream to operate endlessly. Well, we saw every situation at its worst, but boy, did we receive excellent obstetrics training at that place. It's ironic, really. I mean, here we were, just residents in training, but we dealt with all the bizarre stuff that physicians in private practice never saw. And as residents in training, our attitude was, the worse the situation, the more we love taking care of it. That's just the weird sort of mindset that those of us in this business have. I guess it's a form of sickness in and of itself. But it benefits you to have a doctor who has dealt with everything. Okay, so I digress. The reason I'm telling you this about the whole thing about obstetrics training is because we're talking about trade-offs and priorities. And my days at Jeff Davis really brought priorities into perspective. Actually, there was one particular day every single year that was the most significant in terms of priorities. Guess which day of the year was the absolute craziest and most bizarre of the entire year, every single year? What day would that have been? Come on, think about it. What do you think? Christmas Day, New Year's Day, Thanksgiving? I mean, what day do you think was the one that was the craziest? It was none of those. Would you believe that it was Super Bowl Sunday? Yeah, Super Bowl Sunday. Now remember, this is back in the 1980s, before televisions were portable. So you had to be indoors, seated in front of a television to watch the Super Bowl game. And the reason it was the craziest, most bizarre day of the year is because no one would leave the game to bring the women to the hospital when they were in labor. Now, this was long before Uber existed, and taxi cab drivers weren't about to miss the game. So these indigent women had to depend on their family members or the bus. And it just so happens that most people had their priorities all mixed up, and they'd refuse to miss the game in order to bring the poor women to the hospital to have their babies. And the result was that women would arrive at the hospital well beyond the time they should have. And they'd have the baby half delivered, or they'd arrive with the baby in their arms and the placenta still intact in their uterus and the umbilical cord dangling between their legs. And in some cases, a taxi cab driver or husband would come running frantically into the hospital to announce that a woman was delivering out in the parking lot. And we'd have to run out there and deliver her. We delivered babies in the elevators and in the hallways, everywhere. It was an absolute zoo. Gone was the organization of the place. It was complete chaos. All because nobody wanted to miss the Super Bowl game. Can you imagine? Ever since then, I have referred to the Super Bowl as the Stupid Bowl. I can't help it, I'm sorry. The words Super Bowl game just bring back visions of those chaotic days at Jeff Davis Hospital. Priorities. Keep your priorities straight. Your life and your baby's life might depend on it. Just don't lose sight of what's really important. So start putting your options on the scale and just see how they balance out for you. Don't just wait and see, take control. Make active decisions about how you want your future to be. And I'll leave you with that. Start balancing your options. Until next time, bye.